All right, welcome everyone, and I am Cary Hopkins Eyles. This is using adult learning principles to improve your teaching and training, which is part of a series that Susana and I have been doing, and it's completely okay if you haven't attended the other parts of the series, because you can watch all of them and participate in all of them, or take it as is appropriate for you as an adult learner. So maybe some topics you're very comfortable with and other ones you'd like some input on. So we're on module 5, and I wanted to give you access to the other ones, which I'll do in a moment. Just to introduce myself, I am Cary Hopkins Eyles. I'm a certified addictions professional, global master trainer for UTC, and the deputy director at ICUDDR. And I'm also an instructor here at the University of South Florida. We were just talking about the weather, and I'm in Tampa, so hot and humid. And Susana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. I'm Susana Henriques. I'm a professor I am a sociologist, but I work as a professor at the Department of Education and Distance Learning at the Portuguese Open University. And I'm speaking with you from Portugal. Not exactly from Lisbon today, but from one middle town in the middle of Portugal that is called Marinha Grande.
Nice.
And I'm also a researcher, and I'm found to be a collaborator with the ICUDDR.
Yes, we are very lucky
Great
to
to
have
be.
you.
It's great to be with you.
So I'm going to just refresh for those of you who maybe didn't attend some of our other sessions, or even if you did, if you're anything like me, my memory is terrible. I blame my children. We want to talk about andragogy. So the way that we tend to learn about learning is pedagogy from our childhood. But andragogy is the process of helping adults learn. And it comes from the Greek and meaning man and agogos meaning leader. And so while pedagogy, I like this picture, you have sort of the teacher as the focal point, right? And sending information out. But when we do adult learning, like we're doing with you all today, there's much more of a transmission of information back and forth. So I know as someone who teaches courses at the university level, I learn from my students and I think differently based on things that they bring up to me or experiences they've had, things they share with me. So there's much more of a give and take. And the shift is from the focus of the teacher to the focus of the learner. And one thing is that adults learn best when they have more control over their learning. Obviously, if you take a course, you can't be in charge of all the syllabi and how that course goes. But if you can have some level of decision making in that, there's going to be more buy-in. So andragogy is a term that has been around for a long time, but it was made more widely known in the 1970s by Malcolm Knowles. He's a pioneer and an advocate of adult education. He wrote more than 200 articles and books on adult education. And he talked about these 5 principles of adult learning, although we talk about more at this point because things have evolved since 1970. And in this series, Dr. Henriques and I have been talking about these different principles. So I'll put this in the chat. And if you, oops, or maybe not, maybe I'll have to email it to you because it doesn't seem to want me to put it in the chat. But you can watch all of our earlier sessions. Obviously, we love when you're here live because it's more participatory, but you can watch them. And especially, as I said, if there's a topic that you missed that you think, wow, that could really be helpful to me. So, continuing in our discussion of andragogy, or principles that will help us to instruct adult learners, which many of us do in one form or fashion, we're going to talk about problem-based or problem-centered instruction. So, that could sound negative, and the intention is not that, we're focusing on problems as much as that we're focusing on real-world situations. So, the idea, as we said from the principles of andragogy, is that adults learn best when the learning is problem-centered, when it's around something real. And so this is a teaching method where students learn through complex and open-ended problems. And I'm sure we've all been in classes where, or sessions like this, where someone has, the teacher has brought up, what do you do in this situation? What do you do when this happens? And really, if you think about it, we pretty much solve problems all day. We use our critical thinking skills, we use our communication skills. It's what stimulates us to think and learn throughout the day, the week, everything. And so what we're doing is we're using the real world with our students so that they can make what we're teaching them meaningful. So as adult learners, we want the material to fit into our life. We might be interested in an abstract concept, but when it comes down to it, when we have time crunches, and when we have a need to learn something and use it, we want to take that information. I really love when I do a training for folks and I know that they can take it right then back to their work or whatever it is that they're doing, and they can immediately use what I'm teaching them. And so we want, adults already have so much experience that they're bringing to us, and we don't want to lose that when we begin teaching. So we don't want to teach just top down. We want it to be that ongoing conversation. And so as adult educators, whether we're working with clients or we're working with students or some hybrid, we benefit as educators to tailor instruction to specific problems your students might face rather than just subject, subject, subject. So, for example, if you're teaching in some level of substance use disorder education, you want to do some skill building. So you can teach a student about counseling techniques, but then what are the problems they're going to face? We do role plays or other things where the student can see what they might actually experience. And so it's spending more time doing than learning, but that doing is learning. And the quality of the instruction is more important than just like, I covered this topic. So we always want to involve problem solving or preparation for problem solving. So maybe you don't know exactly how this could apply, but you know that there's going to be problems throughout the day if you're working in a treatment center or whatever that might be. So we want to make sure that we are preparing students for what they're actually going to be doing. Otherwise, they might memorize facts or terms, right? But are we really benefiting them to be able to do the work that they're going to end up doing? So I really loved this infographic where in traditional learning, or maybe we could say in pedagogy, where you're told what you need to know, you memorize it, and then there might be a problem assigned to illustrate how to use it. But in this problem-based learning, the problem is assigned, we identify what we need to know, and we learn and apply it to solve the problem. So one way that this would be an action is if you have a problem that you put out there for your clients. So for example, one of my favorite activities I've ever done with clients was when we were talking about economics. and I gave them examples of families. And okay, this is a stay-at-home mom with this many kids, and their husband makes this much money. This is a single dad, or this is a college student. And I would give them how much money they made, and then have them go through all the bills that the person would have to be paying. And it was so eye-opening. Rather than just teaching them like poverty level or these terms, the students, and these were young adults and, freshmen, junior, seniors in high school, in college, and they were just stricken by, how do you survive on this amount of money with this size family and things of that nature. So it was very much a learning experience for them rather than just I got this information and now I'm going to put it away or forget about it. And so here are some ways that we can improve our teaching and mentoring. So how do we operationalize this problem-centered learning? We have to come up with a learning outcome that fits with problem-centered learning. We have to outline a real problem that's related to the course or what you hope for the person to learn, and then practice or present findings, answers to the problem, and solutions. So you want your class to think about things like how would your students, when they become counselors, how would they handle conflict when they facilitate a family group session? So if you wanted your students to understand how to handle conflict when facilitating family group sessions, what might you do?
We would like to hear your experiences and your thoughts about these issues.
Thank you.
You are all able to unmute yourselves, so feel free, please.
For some reason, I can't see you all. When I started talking, that option went away. I'm not really sure why, but I see your names, but I don't see your faces.
We want your class to think about what they would how they would handle.
So we have a participant who was in a meeting recently as well and has joined us today who we're going to ignore until we can get them out of the meeting because they're unfortunately, maybe I can do that, kind of causing a little trouble. So we're just going to say goodbye to them. All right. So if no one has any ideas.
Well, I have an idea.
Oh, yes. Please tell me.
Yeah. Maybe you can ask them to have if it's your class,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you can ask them to have a group, divide the class into groups, and probably create a situation wherein they will be a problem solving challenge to the class. I used to do that when I used to teach, and it's and different scenarios on how they can probably solve a certain issue or discuss about a certain issue. And then you will see how the group would interact with each other. Some will have a dissenting thoughts, others will agree to dissenting thoughts, so there will be disagreements. And one would emerge as a sort of a mediator for the class. Let's say for a group of 6, yeah, or 8, that would be great. and then somebody will do the recording, and then somebody will doing the reporting. It's so fun to do that in class,
It
and
is
this would
easy.
reflect the way they are. Each of the members of the group will reflect how they would you know participate. We bring wherever we go, we bring how we were reared in our own families. Oh, this one seems to be the eldest in the family because this person seems to be the leader. So something like that. I used to have a class of 30, and I divide them into six or five, depends. So I think that's how would I do that. No, the It's just that they should be reminded of certain rules on how to discuss the issue that you have posed to them. That's it.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
that's great. That's great. So you're right. You said several things that I think were important. And then Susanna, if you have any feedback. So for one thing, like you said, it's fun, right? I think that atmosphere in a class is so much more dynamic than just us at the front of the class trying to teach and trying to, I don't know, kind of send information as opposed to showing what it's like. Um, and you do get to see different personality types, strengths, weaknesses. And I like also how you said you can let someone record it because some people are not comfortable being the face of the discussion, right? Or being as verbal. So there's a lot of ways that we can allow people to participate without putting putting them in an uncomfortable position. So one thing I don't know if you did this, Maria, or if you let them come up with their own. I used to let them come up with their own conflict, but I found that if they have experience in the field, then that's very successful. But
Yeah.
if they're new to the field and they haven't really done it, then that can be difficult because
Yeah.
the examples they come up with are a little bit false, like not what you actually would see.
Yeah, but sometimes in the class, the leader that emerges seem to be, say, one of the top three in class, and they're
Yeah.
usually dynamic, these students. And yeah, and it ignites a lot of participation also from the other members of the group. I
It
think
really
it's,
does. I
yeah.
think it's better for them, but it's better for us too, right?
Less, yeah,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Did I miss anything on that, Susanna?
I don't think so.
Okay. Does
Thank you,
anyone else have?
Maria.
Yeah, thank you so much. Does anyone else have any thoughts on how they might handle this, um, a conflict when facilitating a family session? What if you only have them online, or what if you have them, asynchronously? So you're not actually, you want to teach them and work on this, but you're not actually with them at, live.
They're online.
So two different options. They might be online like we are together where we can talk, right? Or they might be taking your class like you record it and they watch it when they can. Are there still ways to do assignments like this?
Um,
We have our quiet group today.
no.
So a couple thoughts, and Susanna, please jump in because I know you probably have more experience in this than me, but I'm just thinking, for example, I did a mentoring class that was doing some of these kind of problem solving learning. That was something that I was really proud of, and we focused on that a lot. And I had them all completely online. and it was really skill-based. We did not want it to be abstract or theoretical. So we did a lot of role plays online. We did a lot of breakout rooms that you can do in Zoom and WebEx. So we utilized the technology as much as possible. And usually to get things going for comfortability's sake, I would do the role play. I would let them kind of come at me as a difficult client or things of that nature. And then in terms of, and another thing that we did, and this was sort of the asynchronous part of our class, was that they would sometimes watch like a video where they saw a family group session that, just as one example, that was going poorly or that where there was conflict, and they would write down what they would have done or what they saw that was done well. So there are ways that you can make sure that we're still doing meaningful problem-solving, problem-centered learning, even if you have those challenges or those different formats.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I do agree with you. I will bring an example for you next that is with a synchronous activity, online synchronous activity, but I used to work with these strategies also in asynchronous activities with, for example, with the forums in Moodle. It's possible to work in groups and organize activities based on PBL. Okay, we can speak a little bit on this for later on. Now I would like to present this example because PBL is an effective teaching method of developing training for social intervention. It is it allows to develop training in a coherent, integrated, and focused manner, and it isn't only student-centered. It is also student-led. It's the students have really a different role and a more active role. These strategies, this PBL methodology starts in the 50s of the last century. Of course, it wasn't called like this at the time, but the goal was providing real world problems for medical students to solve. It's the origin of this methodology. And it is an approach that focused on the process of solving a problem and acquiring knowledge related with that, the field of that problem. The core idea is that you can solve problems in unique ways. Each one of us can solve problems in unique ways. We think critically and are able to solve complex problems. So we all need to know how to navigate in a complexity of global society and need to be empowered to solve real problems, real world problems. And this is the basis. The theoretical foundations of PBL are John Dewey's notion of democratic education, and also Paulo Freire concept of critical pedagogy. I will share with you a real life example from my practice. And the context is an online training on family conflict mediation. It was a synchronous short course that was delivered online. And we followed PBL methodology, which has 4 phases. The first one, Cary, please, can you
Yes, can I
move
make
on
one
this?
quick comment?
Yes, please.
I just want to say I am really glad that medical professionals are doing problem solving learning. I don't really want a doctor to work on me if they haven't tried some of these things out beforehand.
Yes, yes, it's very important to develop that ability, not only in medical professionals, but also there. But they were the beginners of these models, of this methodology.
Thank
So
goodness.
this was developed, as I was saying, in 4 phases. The first one was present or identify the initial problem. And this can be done by the professor, by the individual students, or in small groups, or even by the whole class. PBL can be used at 3 levels, 3 different levels. At the curriculum level, when all problems and objectives are identical for all students. At a group level, when each group can have either the same problem and different objectives, or vice versa, or different problems and identical objectives. And the third level is the individual student level, when objectives can be determined for each individual student. And this allows to provide students with the same amount of information. The problem that will be defined, as Cary mentioned a little while ago, should be clear and should be relevant and related with reality, and allowed to have multiple solutions or paths for multiple answers and multiple ways for multiple ways to find the answers. That is, it must be open-ended. Here in this course, we created small groups through Zoom breakouts, was the tool that we were using, and each group had a different problem and the same learning objectives. So we worked at the group level with different problems, but the same learning objectives. The second phase is to develop a plan for solve the problem. And here students start working collaboratively when they figure out what they will do in order to solve that particular problem. It can be a small plan of action, or it can be a more complex one where students might engage in research, brainstorming, and in a few cases, they might even decide to build a product. In our case, it could be a media campaign, a flyer, an educational resource, whatever. But students should use what they already know and build knowledge on the top of it. In this phase, really encourage collaborative work, and students together start to discussing ideas, brainstorming, finding paths, and it's a really important phase. The third one is evaluate if they are effective in solving the problem. And in our course, we used a role-playing approach for simulating situations, characters, approaches. And finally, to evaluate the fourth phase, to evaluate the implementation, where they analyze the results and reflect on the process. This is very important because this allows form all the process, self-evaluation.
I don't know if it's just me, but I'm losing you, Susana. You're cutting out. Can other people hear Dr. Henriques? Because I can't.
What about now?
People.
Sorry?
You sound very far away. Did something change?
Nothing. In the same place,
Hmm.
I have tells me
Yeah, you sound like you're like underwater or something.
I'm not.
That's good to know.
I don't know.
Well, can other people, Maria, can you hear her?
Like she's so far,
Right.
and
Right.
parang it looks like there's water.
Yes. You're using your microphone on your headphones, Susanna? No, I can't hear you at all.
And we can't hear her. I can't hear her.
No.
Is it any better now?
Perfect. Perfect.
It's perfect now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll go back to the went away so that I could, yeah.
Is it better now?
Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So it was my phones that
Ah, yes.
were tired, maybe.
Okay, so can you talk to us about implementation again because we missed a lot of that?
Okay. In this last phase, students were invited to evaluate the implementation. So they had to analyze the results and reflect on the process as a whole. So I was saying that this is a very important phase because here the all components of PBL inform the process. All of the phases, all of the steps, the little steps are important in here when we are in this last phase. And here we use also self-evaluation, peer evaluation, where each group evaluate one of the others, and also professor evaluation, of course. But all of these stages follow the same criterias or identical criterias. It is important to pay a little bit attention of this issue of the assessment in PBL, because can you please, Cary, move the slides on? Thank you. PBL allows to develop content knowledge, long-term memory, problem solving, reasoning, communication, collaboration, and self-assessment skills, and create learning objectives that help students to follow the tasks to complete, being individual or group tasks. And it is important to guarantee positive and constructive feedback, as mistakes are learning opportunities, don't represent a lack of ability, and students must be encouraged to learn from their mistakes. This is important in the learning process and also in PBL models. And it is important, Cary, can you please, thank you. It is important that problems feel real to the students. And in this context, digital technology becomes critical because it's not possible to ignore it. Our devices have a slew of apps that allows to do some activities that once required additional time and resources. And we must take advantage of this. And problem-based learning provides a model that taps into both the connective and the creative capacity of technology, so that students can access to tools and the information to improve the capacity to creatively solve these real-world problems. And this is basically problem-based learning.
Yeah, and a few things, I just want to go back for a minute. Thank you. Like when you mentioned here about long-term memory, I can speak for myself that if you just tell me terms and I'm supposed to write them down and memorize them, that is not going to stick for any length of time. But if I do a role play, or if I create a document that I think would be helpful to solve the problem, or I look at a system issue and you do the work, you get into it and it becomes meaningful. And as you said, you get feedback and maybe you made a mistake, or maybe, wow, you really did excellent in this piece. That sticks with us. That's an experience rather than just someone giving us information. So I can tell you that the students who had that class with me where we did the budgeting for a family that maybe was at the poverty line, they might not remember things I taught them in that class, but they'll remember that experience and maybe have more empathy for a family of, who's struggling financially, just as one example. So I think that really stuck with me when you said that, because it's so true and valuable. Another example that I experienced was when I taught that mentoring class. I was teaching motivational interviewing skills or motivational enhancement techniques. And I had counselors who'd been in the field for a very long time who said to me, like, we role played motivational enhancement. So maybe I would be the counselor and Susana, you would come at me like a difficult client, and I would show rolling with resistance, for example. And my students who were adult learners who had been doing this for a while said, oh, that's what that's supposed to look like. They had heard the concepts, they had heard the terms, but they didn't really get it until we did it. Until we put a problem, this difficult client who you can't quite get through to or whatever, and we actually played it out. So that was really eye-opening for me as an instructor, of how powerful that was, that literally they all talked about how eye-opening that was, even though they knew motivational enhancement techniques, but they didn't have them. They knew them, but they didn't really have them in their toolbox yet.
Yes. There is a quotation that is famous that says that when you talk to me, I forget. When I see an information, I can remember it. But when I'm involved in the task, with something, I understand and I learn.
Yes.
And
Yes,
it's
exactly.
what about you were saying.
Yeah. So for those of you who are here with us, give us your thoughts. Does this make sense? Would this work in your setting, whether you're an instructor at a university or you're teaching clients or whatever it may be? Do you think it will work? Do you see challenges, and what questions do you have? either for us or for your peers here.
Oh,
Hi.
yeah. This one, do you see how this could work in your setting? I do individual therapy with young people,
Mm-hmm.
and I noticed that when you do psychoeducation, especially now that we have shifted to the online, still we are online, when you discuss a certain concept, it sticks to their mind when you connect it to their experiences. For example, some of these very young people play roadblocks, they feel play video games. You know, I had this client who had some kind of symptoms of mild symptoms of ADHD, and you know, I suggested that if she could, if he could look at some apps that could help him with his ADHD, you know, simple ones. So, and he was like, his eyes were beaming.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, why should I do the videos, the apps? Maybe some pictures could help because I'm doing online, and it did. It forced me to draw and show him, no. So I think it's helpful to have some aids and have some other aids, learning aids to help our clients to understand their their situation or their condition, because it becomes more vivid and more meaningful to them. I agree with you, Cary, about that. So not only in class, but also in helping our clients understand themselves. It's quite helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really powerful. And I like you did two things that Susana mentioned earlier that was creative and it was connecting, right?
Mm.
So to me, whether we're counseling, teaching, like you said, psychoeducation, if we can connect and we can build that relationship, there's going to be success. And I think that that's one of the things that problem-based learning, or you're doing some experiential learning, is it connects with people rather than just giving them information. You could have just given this client, here's what mild ADHD symptoms look like. This seems like what you have, but you're connecting in a way that is meaningful to them. As someone with small children, I know all about the Roblox and all of that more than I've ever wanted to know.
Yeah.
I know
Yes,
Susanna
yes.
has the same
I have to
situation.
really read about the roadblocks, because
Oh,
even like this 8-year-old, my God, this is master of roadblocks.
oh, if you would
So
like, my 10-year-old will talk to you about it for 12 hours. So I'll,
really,
yeah.
that's great.
But that's such a lovely example. Thank you for sharing that because, we it may be different in your setting because it's like you said, it's more clinical, it's not teaching it, but you're still
Yeah,
teaching, but you're
yeah,
teaching in an individual way that they have to get into the problem because otherwise, like Susanna said, they'll hear it, but
uh-huh.
it won't be meaningful.
Yes, and it sticks to them, and actually, it also lessens the stigma if they know more about their condition.
Hmm.
So, yeah, psychoeducation, I think, is also teaching them,
Oh,
actually. They just
absolutely.
added psycho.
Yeah, and another thing, I was just talking to someone about, it's funny about ADHD. This young person is starting on medication, and I was saying to them, these are possible side effects, not to scare them, but
Yeah, yeah.
so, like you said, to empower them. So if those things happen, they know not to be scared. They know not to, they know, okay, this is expected. Obviously, if it's intense or it's ongoing, then we'll do something. But, another way, that's like and you can problem solve that too, right? So, okay, if your heart rate seems to go up, like, how are we going to handle this? And kind of anticipate, knowing how to handle things like that if they come up, whether it's about medication, whether it's about triggers, whatever. So it's definitely valuable with our clients, not just our students. I did
Yeah.
a lot of that when I was in clinical practice, where it was like, all right, you're going to go out on the bus and your dealer's going to be there. What are you going to do?
Yeah, can I add to that also? One of the things that I find very effective also for them to, is the use of metaphors. Metaphors are quite helpful also.
Mhm.
Where in the metaphor, they are part of uh, they can sort of identify or sort of put their themselves into that metaphor. Parang
Yeah.
also like experiential, but metaphor helps a lot also. It doesn't directly refer to the issue, but
Mhm.
it's something similar,
Right.
and it looks like it's easier to accept, the condition,
As long as you don't have a really literal person, because I've dealt with some really literal folks that are like not getting it, because I'm all about the metaphors and the apps. Yeah.
yeah, correct. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, I think we have a question in the chat. I'm just gonna pull that up. How a peer educator can help to the clients at a drug treatment center with limited resources. Well, I would say one of the good things about what we're talking about is that it doesn't require a great deal of resources. It requires, like Susana said, basically, I would go back to her words of creativity and connection. So if you're a peer educator, or you have peer educators at your center, they can talk about their own experience and say, here's a problem I experienced. Let's problem solve what you would do if that happened, which gives you the real world piece and gives you buy-in from the person, like, oh, I might deal with that. How would I deal with it? Or, of course, the client can bring the problem to the peer educator. This is something I'm dealing with, or I anticipate dealing with. And then the peer educator can help them walk through. And I one of the things I love that Susana said is that we're not talking about problems that have a right answer, right? There's not one answer. This is not a math equation or a science experiment. So it's like, in that dealer example we talked about earlier, you're going to run into your dealer. Is one way to try to avoid them, is one way to confront them, is one way to, there's lots of different ways you can handle a situation like that. And maybe you problem solve more than one. And we used to call it playing the tape out. Like, you try to imagine, well, if I do this, what will happen next? Like it's a movie. And you talk about all those different things. So, I think that there's a lot of potential for problem solving learning without a great deal of resources. Would you add anything to that, Susana?
Just to agree with everything that you have mentioned and say that you you have all the resources that you need. You have the clients or the students, and they can bring their own problems, or you can elaborate based on that and work from there, and take advantage of their own experience and of their own abilities and competences and work from there. So you don't need um, much more resources than that. When I mentioned the digital technologies, it's because you can uh, use it and take advantage of those technologies in certain scenarios, but in other ones, it's not possible and it's not mandatory. the methodology of problem based learning, it's not technology based. So we
No,
can use
obviously,
technology to reach more people, to do a session like this where we are in different parts of the world, but
yeah.
it's not mandatory. It's not the key factor.
No, and honestly, most of the problem solving that I've done, like, yes, I did the sessions like this with mentees, but like in my teaching, it's in person. It's just with them doing simple, straightforward role plays or coming up with, or doing writing assignments, essays or things on how they would handle a situation. It's really not, it's very low tech. All right. Any other questions? That was a good challenge, anticipation challenge there. Any other questions? One thing I would like to be sure I do is to give you all the link to the earlier sessions. Do you want to take that question, Susana, or at least read it, and then if I'll help if need be?
Yes, I'll try. How does these days, the modern drugs affects the behavior, and what will be the best way to deal with them? I have seen recently most of clients get very violent, and some of them do harm to themselves to get what they want to fulfill their demand. Well, if we are dealing with a group of persons that are under the drug effects, maybe we cannot use this kind of strategies because we are not dealing with learning at all. We have to mobilize some treatment techniques or other but we are not talking about the same thing here. This is not a treatment technique. We can use these techniques, this methodology, this problem-based learning after the crisis is stopped, when the person is no longer under the effects of these substances, of these drugs, and then we can work of them with these methodologies in order to improve change in her behavior or in her using habits, but never during the effects of substance.
Perfect. Thank you. Yep, very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have placed in the chat the YouTube playlist from sessions 1 through 4. So if you want to see any of those, that's open for you to do so. And we do similar to today, we do a topic and then we do some we give like a real life example, or sometimes we do some experiential. So check those out and see the topics for those. Hopefully you can see that in the chat. Any other questions or comments? I appreciate your input.
Sorry. I would say that the one of the big challenges that we face, thinking in the previous slide that you have, the reality check, one of the biggest challenges that we face is when we have a quiet audience.
Yep.
Quiet
You're
audience.
right. You're right. Especially when we're doing problem-based learning, because we're looking for everyone to be active. Yep. Okay, well, we are coming up on the hour, so if no one has additional questions, then we can finish up. I'm going to put my email in the chat in case anyone thinks of questions later or has anything that they would like to, any feedback. We will send you a survey so you can give us feedback on this course today, as this is a pilot and we're hoping to continue to improve and make this more attractive and effective and helpful for our folks. So definitely let us know what you thought. And thank you to Susana for your time. I appreciate you so much. And thank you for everyone for attending.
It's a pleasure to be here and collaborate with you and be here with all of you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
And Maria, get some sleep. I know it's late there. We appreciate you being here. All right. Take care, everyone.